I think we're going to begin the hearing. Members will be in and out of here, so, we have this room for a limited period of time, so I would like to start. Before I begin my statement, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that a statement prepared by Congressman Jim McDermott of Washington State be entered into the record, as well as a statement by Toby Cadman, Foreign Counsel for the defendants before the International Crimes Tribunal. I'd like to ask unanimous consent that his statement be part of the record. So good morning, and good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank everyone for being here today for this important hearing on human rights in Bangladesh. In particular, I want to thank the staff of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission for organizing this hearing. I want to thank our witnesses for their leadership and working to improve human rights conditions in Bangladesh. And I also want to thank Congressman Crowley and Congressman Ellison for encouraging the Commission to hold this hearing. Although Bangladesh's government has taken some steps to improve the human rights situation within its borders, new reports of torture, arbitrary arrest, and enforced disappearances by security forces continue to emerge. The government has increasingly politicized the judiciary, constrained access to justice for activists and members of opposition parties, and limited freedom of association. Some of these abuses are fueled by widespread official corruption. Violence against women, including rape, dowry-related assaults, acid attacks, and sexual harassment, is also far too common. Women in Bangladesh remain in a subordinate position in society, and the government needs to do more to protect their rights. Labor rights are also inadequately protected and have been limited by increasingly stringent laws. Repression against trade unionists and labor rights activists is rampant, and protests are routinely met with violence and arrests. Conditions for workers are awful and include rock-bottom wages, tight labor rights restrictions, and poorly enforced health and safety standards. Recently, Aminul Islam, a leader of the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity, was found dead on a street in Dhaka and showed signs of torture and abuse. His murder remains an open case, and the Bangladesh government has not ordered an independent and impartial investigation into his death. These human rights violations are compounded by widespread impunity in Bangladesh for criminal behavior. Despite strong evidence that security forces are continuing to arbitrarily arrest people, often torturing and killing them in custody, the Bangladesh government has refused to acknowledge the need for accountability. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has stated that her government has zero tolerance for extrajudicial killings, but has failed to properly investigate allegations and prosecute the perpetrators. Burma, like neighboring Bangladesh, has also been faced with mounting violence in recent weeks. Rakhine State in the west of Burma has seen an escalation in state-sponsored violence against Rohingya, a stateless community of Muslim minorities who have suffered from persecution and discrimination for decades. This recent outburst of violence has forced many Rohingya to flee their communities, seeking refuge across the border in Bangladesh. Rather than offering sanctuary for refugees seeking protection from persecution and abuse, Bangladesh has forced members of this community to return back to Burma, where they face an immediate threat to life and safety. I stand with many human rights groups that have called on the government of Bangladesh in recent weeks to abide by its human rights obligations and to open its borders to these refugees. U.S. policy toward Bangladesh emphasizes support for political stability and democracy, development, and human rights. The United States has recommended the creation of an independent unit to investigate allegations of torture, disappearance, and extrajudicial killings by the Rapid Action Battalion. Reconciliation efforts between the Bangladesh government, business, and labor organizations have been encouraged by the international community. Endemic corruption and criminality, weak rule of law, limited bureaucratic transparency, and political polarization have long undermined government accountability. Accountability for abuses is particularly important so that the Bangladeshi people believe that the era of impunity is starting to come to an end. For its part, the United States should continue to provide Bangladesh with assistance to strengthen the rule of law and advance respect for human rights. And I want to welcome our first panel of witnesses. First, the Honorable Robert Blake, the Assistant Secretary, Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, and the Honorable Eric Beale, Acting Associate Deputy Undersecretary, Bureau of International Labor Affairs, Department of Labor. Welcome to both of you, and happy to be here. Mr. Blake, why don't we begin with you?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And at the outset, let me thank you for your interest in, it's on. Maybe I get it a little closer there. At the outset, let me just thank you and the Commission for your interest in Bangladesh. And let me also thank Representatives Crowley and Ellison, who have been shown a very continuing strong interest in Bangladesh and also great leadership in Congress on that issue. Mr. Chairman, Bangladesh is a country of strategic importance to the United States. It's the 7th largest country in the world by population, and it has the world's 4th largest Muslim population. It's a moderate, tolerant, secular, mostly democratic alternative to violent extremism. A leader in promoting regional connectivity and improved ties with its neighbors, Bangladesh promotes stability in a troubled region. As the largest contributor of forces to UN peacekeeping missions in some of the world's most dangerous conflicts, Bangladesh helps foster global peace. Bangladesh has been growing at an annual rate of 5 to 6% over the last 2 decades. It's an increasingly important trading partner and destination of U.S. investment. U.S. exports to Bangladesh doubled during the last year, and we are the largest investor in Bangladesh. It's also a focus country for all of President Obama's signature development initiatives, including the Global Health Initiative, the Global Climate Change Initiative, and the Feed the Future Initiative. The United States and Bangladesh cooperate closely on security issues, ranging from counterterrorism to counter-piracy and the mitigation of natural disasters, all of which were discussed during the first ever U.S.-Bangladesh security dialogue in April. The government of Bangladesh has also consistently prioritized greater regional integration, a key U.S. interest in a region that remains among the least integrated in the world. Secretary Clinton visited Bangladesh in May, marking the first visit by a U.S. Secretary of State in 9 years. While there, she and her Bangladeshi counterpart announced the U.S.-Bangladesh Partnership Dialogue to provide strategic direction to the wide array of existing and future partnership activities. During her trip, Secretary Clinton also raised many serious concerns about human rights issues with the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, as well as with leading members of Bangladeshi civil society and at events with the press and public at large. The Secretary's public and private remarks underscore this administration's policy of raising human rights concerns with the government of Bangladesh to safeguard Bangladesh's role as a moderate democracy with a vibrant press and dynamic civil society. Secretary Clinton noted our concern about the murder of labor rights activist Aminul Islam, whom you mentioned, and the disappearance of opposition local leader Ilyas Ali. The rights of workers were also front and center on the Secretary's visit to Bangladesh. We have urged the government to allow workers to freely form unions and allow organizations that seek to protect workers' rights to operate freely. This is not only an ethical question, but also one that has the potential to have a huge impact on the Bangladeshi economy. The ready-made garments industry employs millions of Bangladeshis, 90% of whom are women. American and other foreign buyers are increasingly unwilling to have their valuable brand names associated with abuse of worker rights, and it is clearly in Bangladesh's interests to make progress on this issue, a point that Secretary Clinton underscored during her visit. My colleague Eric Beale from the Department of Labor will speak more about this. There continue, as you said, Mr. Chairman, to be credible reports that Bangladesh's Rapid Action Battalion, a paramilitary law enforcement group made up of policemen and army soldiers, is involved with extrajudicial killings and disappearances. Due to Leahy vetting requirements, we are barred from providing RAB with any form of training other than that related to human rights. To this end, the United States government embedded a retired U.S. Marshal within RAB for 4 months last year to help stand up and operationalize an internal affairs unit that will provide a much-needed mechanism to hold accountable those who commit human rights violations. Civil society has been Bangladesh's calling card for decades. Homegrown organizations like Brock and Grameen Bank have gone global, exporting innovative ideas like microfinance to a worldwide audience. Maintaining the traditional vibrancy of Bangladeshi civil society is a top priority for the State Department. For this reason, we are concerned by reports from some local NGOs that space for civil society is shrinking. Nearly 2 years after the resignation of Dr. Muhammad Yunus, Grameen Bank has been without a permanent managing director at its helm. While the bank has continued its good work, we have emphasized both to the government and the Grameen board the importance of finding a qualified replacement for Dr. Yunus who is acceptable to all sides and who could preserve the integrity and effectiveness of the bank in helping Bangladesh's most vulnerable citizens and fulfilling its commitment to its 8.3 million borrowers, most of whom are women. We've also been disappointed by Bangladesh's policy of turning away Rohingya and other individuals fleeing ethnic and sectarian violence in Burma since early June. This stands in marked contrast to the country's traditional policy of non-refoulement. The U.S. government has and will continue to raise concern for the well-being of these individuals at the highest levels. There's positive news as well to report, Mr. Chairman. We were encouraged this past spring when the government of Bangladesh passed comprehensive anti-trafficking in persons legislation that, when fully enforced, could make a huge difference in protecting some of the country's most vulnerable citizens. While Bangladesh has made progress in protecting women and children victims of trafficking, this law is the first of its kind in Bangladesh that also guards against the exploitation of male laborers. I want to end by repeating what I said earlier. As a successful, moderate, tolerant, secular, democratic alternative to violent extremism, and as a model for lifting millions out of poverty, providing an important voice for regional stability, and contributing more than any other country to UN peacekeeping, Bangladesh is of strategic importance to the United States, but it still faces many challenges that the U.S. is working with and encouraging Bangladesh to address. And let me just, again, extend my greetings to both Representative Crowley and Representative Ellis. And I earlier said our appreciation for the leadership both of you have shown and consistently with respect to Bangladesh. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Beal?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Congressman Ellis and Congressman Crowley for convening this important and timely hearing, and I'm honored to join Assistant Secretary Blake on this first panel. The Bureau of International Labor Affairs' central mission is to ensure that workers around the world are treated fairly and can share in the benefits of the global economy. To pursue this objective, we use a range of approaches ranging from monitoring and reporting on labor conditions, helping enforce the labor provisions in U.S. trade agreements and trade preference programs, providing targeted technical assistance, working with the International Labor Organization, and working with civil society and other stakeholders. My remarks over the next few minutes will summarize how we've used these different tools in Bangladesh. Now, the concerns about labor rights in Bangladesh are indeed significant, and they cut across key sectors of the economy. They include violations of freedom of association and unsafe working conditions in the ready-made garment sector, similar conditions in the shrimp processing sector, and in the country's export processing zones, or EPZs. As Assistant Secretary Blake noted, the administration has not hesitated to raise these worker rights issues and concerns with the government of Bangladesh at the highest levels, including during Secretary Clinton's trip in May. Before highlighting further the ways we've engaged through ILAB, through the Department of Labor, the government of Bangladesh, I wanted to first focus on what we really consider to be our most important mission, our most important responsibility, which is engaging directly with those in Bangladesh who are at the forefront of efforts to improve the protection of worker rights. ILAB, the Bureau of International Labor Affairs, works closely with the U.S.-based Solidarity Center, which will be represented on the next panel, in Dhaka, and other labor rights NGOs on a range of labor rights issues. Now, one of the most important and credible local partners has been the Bangladesh Center for Workers' Solidarity, or BCWS, led by Kalpona Akhtar. The organization's advocacy for workers has made it a target. As you well know, it was deregistered and criminal charges were filed in 2010 against its leadership. Those charges remain on the books. They have not been dismissed, despite, in our view, an absence of clear evidence to substantiate them. Then in early April 2012, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, in your opening statement, BCWS labor organizer Amin al-Islam was found tortured and murdered. In the aftermath of that killing, we worked closely with Assistant Secretary Blake's team, others at the State Department, and with civil society, and notably with business groups as well, to convey to the government of Bangladesh our deep concerns and our expectations for a thorough and impartial investigation. We also hosted Ms. Akhtar at the Department of Labor when she visited Washington just weeks after the killing, and reaffirmed in those meetings and subsequently our support for her work and that of her colleagues at BCWS. We joined the State Department and the rest of the U.S. government in the commitment to monitor the ongoing investigation of the Amin al-Islam killing in order to ensure transparency, accountability, and justice. One of the primary approaches we use for engaging Bangladesh on internationally recognized worker rights has been through the Generalized System of Preferences, or GSP, program, through which the United States provides unilateral trade preferences for developing countries. Among the criteria under the GSP program for preferential treatment, the statute mandates that beneficiaries be taking steps to afford such internationally recognized worker rights in order to maintain their eligibility. Gsp Review of Bangladesh, pursuant to a petition filed by the AFL-CIO in 2007, has resulted in detailed attention to conditions in the large and rapidly growing ready-made garment sector. In particular, GSB has been and will remain a mechanism for sustained engagement and pressure on the government of Bangladesh to address practices that range from unsafe factory conditions to unpaid and excessive overtime to a failure to enforce minimum wage laws. Now, while engagement with the government of Bangladesh is paramount and obviously critical, it's not enough. To that end, we're also committed to engaging with the private sector, specifically those involved in the garment sector supply chain. Last year, we convened a roundtable on promoting labor compliance in Bangladesh, which set the stage for an expanded dialogue with buyers on labor rights compliance and high-priority concerns such as fire safety. I'm pleased to say there's been some progress in this regard. The second panel may describe further, including an agreement between PVH, which includes brands like Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein, on a fire safety MOU, although other companies have been slow to pick up the mantle and to join that. That continues to be a work in progress. We are encouraged that a number of the leading brands that source from Bangladesh have spoken out strongly about unsafe working conditions and other labor rights concerns, and we welcome this direct communication, including after the Amin al-Islam killing and through a June 21st letter to the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. But at the same time, it's important to first recognize we need a larger group, a more diverse group of buyers, particularly in the garment sector, to do more to leverage their market power to help improve labor conditions in Bangladesh. And that includes circumstances in which excessive hours and other poor working conditions may be a direct result of the pressure that factories feel in order to fill orders rapidly and meet other conditions established by their supply chain partners. Finally, we also, in addition to engaging with these global buyers, we work directly to strengthen mechanisms for addressing labor rights and working conditions at the factory level, including in the garment sector. The Bureau of International Labor Affairs, Department of Labor, is currently providing approximately $1.5 million for an international labor organization project called Promoting Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work in Bangladesh, with the objective of addressing specific challenges faced by workers and employers organizations by building local capacity to promote freedom of association and collective bargaining. This program launched in January of this year. It's a 2-year program. The first assessment will be made in January 2013, and we'd be happy to provide more details on the program as progress reports come in. Another way to engage at the factory level that Assistant Secretary Blake mentioned is through the ILO IFC, International Labor Organization, International Finance Corporation joint program called the Better Work Program. Better Work has 3 core elements: monitoring, remediation, including training, and public reporting. We've supported Better Work in other key garment export markets such as Haiti, Cambodia, Lesotho, and others, and stakeholders have increasingly expressed an interest in having Better Work extended to Bangladesh. To that end, Better Work has gone through a feasibility study review in 2011, last year, and is currently finishing up the design phase of a program, and will decide in September whether to pursue a formal launch of a Better Work program in Bangladesh. Should they do so, we will commit funds to help through the first year of that program to ensure it's launched and can extend the objectives of Better Work to the garment sector in Bangladesh. Finally, we engage in reporting and monitoring through our Office of Child Labor, Forced Labor, and Human Trafficking. There are 3 congressionally mandated reports issued each year. They'll be coming out in mid to late September this year, dealing with labor conditions. In addition, we have contracted for 2 specific reports on Bangladesh. First, we funded a detailed report on child labor in the informal garment sector, meaning outside formal production channels. It focuses, as I say, on the informal sector. That report will be finalized in the next month or 2. We have a second report pending on forced labor issues in Bangladesh's shrimp sector that also will be coming out in the next 1 to 2 months. Those issues have been well documented, including through the course of the GSP process. So in sum, that's how a snapshot of some of the different programs that iLab works on to advance the core objective of trying to increase respect for labor rights and improve working conditions in Bangladesh. We've seen some value and some progress through these efforts. At the same time, we all need to acknowledge that much remains to be done. The record remains largely incomplete. This is a work in progress. Violations in key sectors, as both of us have noted and as you've noted, remain widespread. And the Amin al-Islam killing raises concerns that worker rights advocates remain targets. We'll continue to publicize our concerns with violations of labor rights in Bangladesh, while at the same time working with our colleagues in government, with those of you on the Commission, and with other stakeholders through a combination of dialogue, engagement, and support for promising initiatives on the ground. Thanks.